The Night Without Shadows. This story is true. It happened to me 8 years ago in the jungle highlands of Chiapas, Mexico, where the Maya once built cities that touched the clouds and made sacrifices to gods whose names have been forgotten by everyone except the darkness itself. After that night, I understood why they made those sacrifices. Some things demand payment. Some things have been collecting debts since before humanity learned to speak. If you are listening to this in the dark, I suggest you stop and turn on every light in your home, because what I'm about to describe might be waiting outside your window right now, listening, patient, hungry. That night I heard the sound of a metal bucket striking stone. I told myself it was the wind. Then I heard something running fast like a dog, but somehow wrong. I told myself it was a wild animal. Then I heard chains dragging across the ground, heavy and slow, stopping right outside my bedroom door. And I knew with the certainty that comes only when you face something ancient and terrible that nothing on this earth makes a sound like that. My name is Valentina. I was 17 years old, and I am telling you this because someone needs to know what lives in the mountains of Chiapas before it finds them too. The Maya knew about this land long before anyone else set foot on it. They built their pyramids to the north and south, their cities in the valleys and along the rivers, but they never built anything in the region where my father lived. Not a temple, not a house, not even a road. When the Spanish conquistadors asked the Maya elders why, the elders would only shake their heads and say that the land belonged to something else, something that was here before the first Maya crawled out of the cenotes, something that would be here long after the last human turned to dust. The Spanish did not listen. They never did. They saw fertile soil and clean water and mountains full of timber, and they thought they had found paradise. They built haciendas, they raised cattle, they carved farms out of the jungle, and one by one they disappeared, not all at once. That would have been merciful. Instead, they vanished slowly over generations. A farmer would go out to check his fields and never return. A child would wander too close to the tree line and simply cease to exist. A family would go to sleep in their beds and be found the next morning with their eyes open, their mouths frozen in silent screams, and their hearts stopped as if they had seen something so terrible that their bodies simply gave up. The locals have many names for what lives in those mountains. They call it El Chaneque, the soul stealer. They call it La Bruja del Bosque, the witch of the forest. They call it El Nahual, the shapeshifter. But the name that appears most often whispered in the cantinas and muttered in the churches is one that no one dares to speak above a breath. El que camina de noche, the one who walks at night. No one describes it. No one can. Because everyone who has seen it clearly has either died or gone mad. All anyone knows is that it moves through the darkness like darkness itself, that it feeds on something more precious than flesh, and that once it notices you, it never stops watching. I grew up hearing these stories from my grandmother, who heard them from her grandmother, who heard them from the Maya servants who worked in her family's house 300 years ago. I thought they were fairy tales, the kind of thing old women tell children to keep them from wandering into the jungle. I thought they were superstition, the remnants of a conquered people trying to explain the diseases and disasters that had decimated them. I was wrong. I know that now. I know it every time I close my eyes and hear the echo of chains. I know it every time I see movement in the corner of my vision and turn to find nothing there. I know it every time I wake up at 3 in the morning, my heart pounding, my skin covered in sweat, and the absolute certainty that something is standing just outside my window, waiting for me to look. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what happened that night, you need to understand who I was and why I was there. I have always been afraid of the dark, not in the way that children are afraid with their monsters under the bed and their boogeymen in the closet. My fear was different. It was primal, ancient, coded into my DNA like the instinct to breathe. Darkness to me was not the absence of light. It was a presence, a weight, a living thing that pressed against my skin and whispered secrets in languages I could not understand. My mother thought I would grow out of it. She was wrong. At 17, I still slept with a nightlight. I still avoided alleys and parking garages and any place where the shadows grew too thick. I still felt my pulse quicken every time the sun began to set, as if my body knew something my mind refused to accept. The worst part was that I could not explain it. I had never had a traumatic experience in the dark. I had never been attacked or lost or abandoned in a lightless place. The fear was simply there, as much a part of me as my brown eyes or my crooked smile, and no amount of therapy or medication or rational thought could make it go away. My father lived alone on a ranch in the mountains of Chiapas. He had moved there after my parents divorced, retreating from the chaos of Mexico City to the silence of the countryside. The ranch had been in his family for 5 generations, passed down from father to son like an inheritance that no one actually wanted, but no one could bring themselves to sell. I hated that ranch. I hated the way it sat at the edge of the jungle like a ship anchored at the shore of a dark and endless ocean. I hated the way the trees seemed to lean toward the house at night, their branches reaching like fingers, their leaves rustling with sounds that might have been wind, but never quite sounded like it. I hated the way the animals went silent after sunset, as if they knew something was listening and did not want to attract its attention. Most of all, I hated the darkness. The ranch had no electricity. My father was a traditionalist, a man who believed that the old ways were the best ways, and that modern conveniences were a corruption of the soul. He lit his home with oil lamps and candles, drew his water from a stone well in the courtyard, and communicated with the outside world through a battery-powered radio that crackled more than it spoke. At night, the ranch became a tomb. The darkness was absolute, so thick and heavy that you could feel it pressing against your eyeballs. The only light came from the moon when it chose to show itself, and the feeble glow of my father's lamps, which did little more than create islands of yellow in an ocean of black. The nearest village was 10 minutes away by car. The nearest neighbor was a 30-minute walk through terrain that no sane person would attempt in daylight, let alone after dark. There was no cell phone signal, no internet, no way to call for help if something went wrong. My father liked it that way. He said the isolation gave him peace. He said the silence helped him think. He said the darkness was nothing to fear, that it was just the absence of light, that only superstitious fools believed otherwise. I wonder if he still believes that now. My father was a hard man carved from the same stone as the mountains around him. His name was Miguel, though everyone called him Don Miguel, out of a respect that he had earned through decades of honest work and stubborn survival. He was tall and lean, with hands like leather and eyes like flint, and he spoke in sentences that never wasted a word. He did not believe in ghosts. He did not believe in spirits. He did not believe in any of the legends that the locals whispered about when they thought no one was listening. He believed in what he could see, what he could touch, what he could shoot if it threatened his cattle. But he had rules. I did not understand the rules when I was younger. I thought they were just the eccentricities of an old man, the kind of arbitrary restrictions that parents impose on children because they cannot think of anything better to do. Lock all the doors before sunset. Never open a window after dark. If you hear something outside, do not look. If you hear something inside, pray. I asked him once why he had these rules. He looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable, and then he said something that I did not understand until years later. There are things in this world that exist whether you believe in them or not. The wise man does not ask if they are real. The wise man asks how to survive them. I thought he was being dramatic. I thought he was trying to scare me the way fathers sometimes scare their children to keep them safe. I did not know that he was speaking from experience. I did not know that he had seen something years ago that had changed him forever. I did not know that the rules were not superstition. They were survival. I arrived at the ranch on a Thursday afternoon in late November. The bus ride from Mexico City had taken 6 hours, winding through mountains that grew darker and more oppressive with every mile. By the time I reached the village at the base of my father's property, the sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked less like a sunset and more like a wound. My father met me at the bus stop, his truck idling in the dirt lot, his face creased with the kind of smile he reserved only for me. We drove the remaining distance in comfortable silence, the truck bouncing over ruts and rocks, the jungle pressing close on either side of the narrow road. The ranch looked the same as it always did. The main house was a 2-story structure of stone and timber built in the colonial style that the Spanish had favored 3 centuries ago. The walls were thick, the windows small, the roof heavy with red clay tiles that had weathered 1,000 storms. In front of the house, a courtyard of packed earth surrounded the stone well that provided our water. Behind it, the jungle began dense and dark and endless. We ate dinner together as the sun set, sharing stories of our lives in the months since we had last seen each other. My father told me about his cattle, his crops, the repairs he had made to the barn. I told him about my studies, my friends, the boy I'd been seeing who had turned out to be less interesting than he initially appeared. It was a normal evening, pleasant even, the kind of evening that makes you forget why you were ever afraid. Then the darkness came. It did not creep in slowly the way darkness does in the city. It fell like a curtain, sudden and complete, transforming the world outside the windows, from a landscape of green and brown into a wall of absolute black. The oil lamp on the table flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls like living things, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. My father looked at the window, then at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. Something that looked almost like fear. "Tonight you stay inside," he said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a tension that made my stomach tighten. "Do not open your door. Do not look out the window. If you hear anything, you stay in your bed and you wait for morning." I wanted to ask why. I wanted to demand an explanation, but there was something in his face that stopped the words in my throat. "What is different about tonight?" I finally managed. He did not answer immediately. He just looked at the window, at the darkness pressing against the glass, at the reflection of the lamp flame that seemed to flicker in rhythm with something I could not see. "It is cold tonight," he said at last. "Colder than it should be." I did not understand what he meant. I did not understand why that mattered. But I nodded and I did not argue, and when he led me up the narrow stairs to the guest room on the 2nd floor, I did not ask any more questions. The room was small, barely large enough for a single bed, a wooden table and a chair that looked older than my grandmother. The walls were bare stone and the ceiling was made of wooden beams that creaked when the wind blew. A single window looked out over the courtyard toward the well and the jungle beyond. But my father had already drawn the curtain blocking the view. He left me with an oil lamp, a box of matches, and a kiss on the forehead that felt more like a blessing than a good night. "Sleep well," he said. "I will see you in the morning." Then he closed the door, and I heard his footsteps descending the stairs, and I was alone. I tried to sleep. I lay on the bed, pulled the thin blankets up to my chin, and closed my eyes. But sleep did not come. The cold was too intense, seeping through the stone walls and into my bones, making my teeth chatter despite the 2 layers of wool covering my body. The silence was too heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling and the distant hoot of an owl. And there was something else, a feeling, a presence, the sensation that I was being watched, that something out there in the darkness had noticed me and was now waiting to see what I would do. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself it was just my old fear of the dark, amplified by the unfamiliar surroundings and my father's strange warnings. I told myself that there was nothing out there, that the darkness was empty, that I was safe. Then I heard the first sound. It came from the courtyard, from the direction of the well, a sharp metallic clang like a bucket striking stone. Then another, rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone was down there drawing water in the middle of the night. My first thought was that it was my father. He must have needed water. He must have forgotten to fill the jugs before sunset. It was a reasonable explanation, a logical explanation, the kind of explanation that sane people accept and then forget. But the clanging continued, and it grew louder, harder, more violent, as if whoever was down there was not drawing water at all, but slamming the bucket against the stone with increasing fury. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The sound filled the room, echoed off the walls, vibrated in my chest like a second heartbeat, and then as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. Silence. Complete and absolute, as if the world itself had ceased to exist. I waited, counting the seconds, waiting for the sound to return or for some explanation to present itself. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Nothing. Just the darkness pressing against the curtained window. Just the cold seeping into my bones, just the certainty growing with every passing moment that something was very, very wrong. I pulled the blankets tighter, squeezed my eyes shut, and told myself that it was over. Whatever had made that sound was gone. I was safe. I could sleep now. Then I heard the second sound, running, fast, getting closer, and it was coming from inside the house. The running was not like anything I had ever heard before. It was fast, impossibly fast, a staccato rhythm of impacts that sounded like claws striking wood. Tap, 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 tap. It moved through the house below me, racing down the hallway, circling through what I imagined was the living room, then back again. My first thought was an animal, a dog perhaps that had somehow gotten inside, or a coyote desperate and confused looking for a way out. It was a reasonable explanation. It was the kind of explanation that the rational mind reaches for when faced with something it cannot understand. But even as I thought it, I knew it was wrong. The sound was too deliberate, too purposeful. Whatever was making it was not panicked or lost. It was searching. I sat frozen in my bed, the blankets clutched to my chest, my eyes fixed on the door. The oil lamp on the table had burned low while I lay there, its flame barely more than a whisper of orange in the overwhelming darkness. I could see the outline of the door, the faint gleam of the metal handle, and beneath it the thin strip of blackness where the gap met the floor. The running stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. At least when I could hear it moving, I knew where it was. Now it could be anywhere. It could be at the bottom of the stairs. It could be in the hallway. It could be right outside my door, waiting, listening, deciding what to do next. I counted my heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Each one felt like an eternity stretched out by fear into something vast and terrible. 10 heartbeats, 20, 30, nothing. Maybe it left, I told myself. Maybe it found a way out. Maybe it was never inside at all. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. I almost believed it. I almost let myself relax, let my grip on the blankets loosen, let my breathing slow to something approaching normal. Then I heard it again. Tap, 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 tap. But this time it was not running through the house. This time it was climbing the stairs. The sound was slower now, more deliberate. Each tap was distinct, separated from the next by a pause that seemed calculated to maximize the terror of anticipation. I could track its progress by the creaking of the old wooden steps, could count the stairs as it ascended. 1, 2, 3. My father's voice echoed in my mind. Do not open your door. Do not look out the window. If you hear anything, stay in your bed and wait for morning. 4, 5, 6. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call out for my father, to hear his voice, to know that I was not alone in this house with whatever was coming up those stairs. But my throat had closed around the sound, trapping it inside me like a living thing desperate to escape. 7, 8, 9. The stairs ended at 9. I knew this because I had counted them that evening when my father led me to my room. 9 steps from the ground floor to the second floor hallway. 9 steps between me and whatever was down there. The tapping stopped. I stared at the door, at the gap beneath it, at the darkness that pooled there like spilled ink. For a long moment nothing moved, nothing breathed. The world itself seemed to have stopped, suspended in a moment of terrible anticipation. Then I saw it. A shadow darker than the darkness around it moving across the gap beneath my door. It passed slowly, deliberately blocking what little light seeped through from the hallway. I could not see its shape, could not determine its size, could only watch as that patch of deeper black slid past my door and continued down the hall, toward my father's room. I should have stayed in bed. I should have pulled the covers over my head and waited for morning just like my father told me. But the thought of that thing, whatever it was, going to his room while he slept, finding him defenseless and unaware, was more than I could bear. I threw off the blankets and swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold beneath my bare feet, cold enough to make me gasp, and for a moment I hesitated. The oil lamp on the table had gone out completely now. I had not noticed when it happened, had been too focused on the sounds and the shadows to register the moment when its feeble light finally surrendered to the darkness. I needed light. I needed to see what I was dealing with. I fumbled for the matches on the table, my hand shaking so badly that I knocked the box to the floor. The sound it made when it hit seemed impossibly loud, a crack of noise in the suffocating silence. I dropped to my knees, patting the cold stone until my fingers found the box, then pulled it open and extracted a match. The first match broke when I tried to strike it. My hands were trembling too much, my fingers too clumsy with fear. I pulled out another and tried again. Nothing. Not even a spark. I tried a third match, then a fourth. Each one scraped against the striking surface without producing so much as a flicker of light. It was as if the matches had been soaked in water, as if something had drained them of their ability to burn. But they had worked fine that evening. My father had used them to light the lamp, had left the box on the table specifically so I could relight it if needed. There was no reason they should not work now, unless something did not want them to work. I dropped the matches and reached for the lamp instead, thinking that perhaps I could find another way to light it. But the moment my fingers touched the glass, I recoiled. The lamp was cold. Not just cool the way metal gets when left in a cold room, but cold in a way that felt wrong, unnatural, as if it had been sitting in a freezer for hours. Frost had formed on the glass. I could feel it under my fingertips, a thin layer of ice that had no business being there. I pulled my hand back and pressed it against my chest, trying to warm it. My breath came out in visible puffs, now white clouds that dissipated into the darkness like ghosts fleeing a haunted house. The temperature in the room had dropped dramatically far below what the November night could explain. Something was very wrong. I climbed back into bed and pulled the blankets around me, not because I thought they would protect me, but because I did not know what else to do. I lay there in the absolute darkness, listening, waiting, praying to whatever gods might be listening that morning would come soon. For a while there was nothing. Just the silence and the cold and the terrible weight of the darkness pressing down on me like a physical thing. I started to hope that whatever had been in the hallway had moved on, had found its way out of the house, had lost interest in whatever it was searching for. Then I heard the horse. The sound came from outside, from somewhere beyond the walls of the house. A whinny, high and sharp, the kind of sound a horse makes when it is frightened or excited. It cut through the silence like a knife, making me jolt upright in bed. My father did not own horses. He had cattle, a few chickens, a dog that was probably cowering somewhere in the barn right now, but no horses. The nearest horses were in the village 10 minutes away by car. There was no reason for a horse to be outside our house in the middle of the night. The whinny came again louder, this time more insistent. It seemed to come from the front of the house, from the direction of the courtyard. Then it came from the back of the house, then from the left side, then from the right. The sounds were overlapping now, coming from all directions at once, as if there were dozens of horses surrounding the house, all of them crying out in unison. But there was something wrong with the sounds, something that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. They were too similar, too identical, as if they were not coming from different animals but from the same source, somehow projecting itself in multiple directions at once, or mimicking a sound it had heard somewhere long ago without truly understanding what it was. I pressed my hands over my ears, trying to block out the noise. It did not help. The sound seemed to bypass my ears entirely, vibrating in my chest, in my bones, in the deepest parts of my brain where the most ancient fears still lived. "Stop," I whispered. "Please stop." The horses fell silent, all of them all at once, as if someone had flipped a switch. The silence that followed was so sudden, so complete, that it felt like a physical blow. I sat there with my hands still pressed to my ears, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any sound I made would bring the noise back. Then I heard something else, a voice, my own voice, but coming from outside the window. "Who is there?" it said. The exact words I had whispered moments ago, but louder, clearer, projected back at me like a recording. "Please stop." I had not spoken loud enough for anyone outside to hear. I had barely spoken at all, had whispered the words into my pillow like a prayer. There was no way anything could have heard me, unless it was already listening. Unless it had been listening the whole time, waiting for me to make a sound, to give it something to respond to let it know exactly where I was. I clamped my hand over my mouth and pressed myself back against the headboard as if I could somehow merge with the wall and disappear. My heart was pounding so hard that I was sure it could hear that too, could track me by the terrified rhythm of my blood. For a long moment nothing happened. The silence stretched on thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged sound of my breathing through my fingers. Then the horse screamed, not whinnied, screamed. A sound of pure terror and agony, so loud and so close that it seemed to come from right outside my window. I had never heard a horse make a sound like that. I did not know they could make a sound like that. It was the sound of something dying, something being torn apart, something experiencing a horror beyond its ability to comprehend. And then beneath the scream I heard something else. Chains. The sound started low, almost beneath the threshold of hearing, a metallic scraping like iron being dragged across stone. It grew louder as the horse's scream faded, rising to fill the void left by the dying cry. Clank, 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 heavy, slow, deliberate. Each link of the chain striking the ground with a sound like a funeral bell. I had heard chains before. I had heard them in movies and haunted houses and the stories that children tell each other around campfires. But this was different. This was real. This was happening right outside my window, getting closer with each passing second. Clank, clank, clank. The sound circled the house, moving with a patience that was somehow more terrifying than speed. Whatever was making it was in no hurry. It knew I was here. It knew I could not escape. It was taking its time, savoring the approach, letting the anticipation build until I thought I would go mad from the waiting. I tracked its progress by sound alone, around the back of the house, along the west wall, past the corner, and then finally, inevitably, it stopped, right beneath my window. The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the insects dared to make a sound. The world itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I could hear something breathing. Heavy, labored breaths, wet and rattling like lungs filled with fluid. The sound was coming from just below the window, no more than 10 feet away from where I sat paralyzed in my bed. The smell hit me next. A wave of decay, of rot, of something that had been dead for a very long time. It seeped through the cracks in the window frame, filling the room with its presence. I gagged, pressed my hand harder against my mouth, fought the urge to vomit. Then came the knocking. Tock, tock, tock. 3 slow, deliberate raps against the window glass. Patient, expectant. as if whatever was out there knew I could hear it, knew I was awake, knew I was listening, and was waiting for me to respond. I did not move. I did not breathe. I sat there in the darkness, frozen by a fear so profound that it seemed to have replaced my blood with ice water. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, to hide, to do something, anything to escape the thing that was knocking on my window in the middle of the night. But I remembered my father's words, "Do not look out the window. If you hear something, stay in your bed and wait for morning. Talk, talk, talk." The knocking came again, harder this time, more insistent. The glass rattled in its frame, and I heard the old wood creak under the pressure. Something scratched against the glass. A high, thin sound, like nails being dragged across a chalkboard. It traced a pattern up and down, side to side, as if whatever was out there was drawing something, or writing something. I wanted to scream, I wanted to cry. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare and find myself back in my bedroom in Mexico City, safe in my mother's house, far away from this place and whatever lived in its darkness. But I did not move. I did not look. I kept my eyes fixed on the door across the room and prayed. The scratching stopped. The knocking stopped. The breathing faded. And then nothing. Just silence stretching on, until I began to wonder if I had imagined the whole thing. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 30. I had lost all sense of time, lost in the darkness, and the fear, and the desperate hope that it was finally over. Maybe it left, I told myself. Maybe it got tired of waiting. Maybe it found something else to hunt. I let myself relax just a fraction. Let my hands drop from my mouth. Let my shoulders unknot from where they had been hunched around my ears. I should not have done that. The moment I moved, the moment I let my guard down, I knew I had made a mistake. The air in the room changed. The temperature dropped even further, so cold now that I could feel ice forming on my eyelashes. And in the darkness, somewhere very close, I heard a sound. Breathing. Right next to my ear. I screamed. I could not help it. The sound tore out of me like a living thing, raw and primal and full of a terror I had never known I was capable of feeling. I threw myself off the bed, hit the floor hard enough to knock the wind out of me, and scrambled toward the door on hands and knees. Behind me, something laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was not even close to a human laugh. It was a sound like metal scraping against metal, like bones grinding together, like the death rattle of something that had never been alive. It filled the room, bounced off the walls, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I reached the door and grabbed the handle, ready to tear it open and run to my father's room, run out of the house, run anywhere that was away from here. The handle was frozen solid, my skin stuck to the metal ice, bonding flesh to iron, and when I tried to pull away, I left a layer of skin behind. The pain was sharp and immediate, cutting through my panic like a knife. I yanked harder, ignoring the agony, and the handle finally turned. The door swung open, and I threw myself into the hallway. The hallway was dark. Darker than the room had been, darker than anything I had ever experienced. I could not see the walls, could not see the floor, could not see my own hand in front of my face. The only thing I could see was the faint glow coming from beneath my father's door at the end of the hall. I ran toward it, or tried to run. My legs felt like they were moving through water, each step requiring a tremendous effort, as if the darkness itself was trying to hold me back. Behind me, the chains started again, clank, 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 coming from my room, coming through the door I had just opened, coming for me. I ran harder, pushing through the resistance, my torn hand leaving bloody prints on the wall as I steadied myself. The door was getting closer. 20 feet, 15, 10. The chains were getting closer, too. I could hear them right behind me, could feel the cold radiating from whatever was dragging them through the hallway. The smell of rot was overwhelming now, so thick I could taste it on my tongue. 5 feet, 3 feet, 1. I slammed into my father's door and pounded on it with my bloody hand. "Papa, Papa, open the door. Please, Papa, let me in." For one terrible moment, nothing happened. The chains grew closer. The cold grew deeper. I could feel something reaching for me, could sense it stretching out through the darkness, fingers or claws or something worse, brushing against the back of my neck. Then the door opened and my father grabbed me, pulled me inside, and slammed the door shut behind us. The impact of the thing hitting the door from the other side threw us both to the floor. The wood cracked, splintered, bulged inward as if something massive was pressing against it. My father scrambled to his feet and threw his weight against the door, bracing it with his body. "Do not look at it," he shouted. "Whatever you do, do not look at it." I did not look. I pressed my face against the floor and squeezed my eyes shut, and listened as the thing on the other side of the door raged. It pounded, it scratched, it threw itself against the wood with a fury that shook the entire house. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, a symphony of destruction that seemed to go on forever. And then my father started to pray. His voice was low at first, barely audible above the chaos. The words were Spanish, the old Spanish of his grandmother's prayers, phrases I had heard as a child but never paid attention to. He spoke them now with a conviction I had never heard from him before, each syllable sharp and clear and filled with a desperate faith. The pounding stopped. The scratching stopped. The rage stopped. Silence fell over the house like a shroud. My father kept praying, his voice growing stronger, more confident, filling the darkness with something that felt almost like light. I do not know how long we stayed like that. Him pressed against the door, me curled on the floor, both of us waiting for the attack to resume. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The cold began to fade. The smell of rot dissipated. The terrible pressure that had been building in my chest slowly released. When my father finally stopped praying, the silence that followed was different, lighter, emptier, as if whatever had been in the hallway was no longer there. He helped me to my feet and examined my hand in the light of his oil lamp, the lamp that worked perfectly fine, that lit at the first touch of a match, that burned with a steady flame, untouched by the cold that had consumed my room. The palm was raw and bloody where the doorknob had torn the skin away. My father cleaned it with water from a basin, wrapped it in a strip of cloth, and did not say a word about what had just happened. I wanted to ask. I wanted to demand an explanation, to understand what I had just experienced, to know how my father had known what to do. But the look on his face stopped me. It was the look of a man who has seen something terrible, something he had hoped never to see again, something that confirmed his worst fears. We stayed in his room for the rest of the night. I sat in the corner, wrapped in blankets, watching the door. He sat in a chair by the window, the curtain firmly drawn, his eyes never leaving the door either. Neither of us slept. When the first light of dawn began to creep through the cracks in the curtains, my father stood up and walked to the window. He pulled the curtain aside just a fraction and looked out at the courtyard below. I heard him inhale sharply. Without thinking, I crossed the room and looked over his shoulder. The courtyard was empty. The well stood silent and still, the bucket hanging motionless from its rope. The jungle beyond was peaceful, green and gold in the early morning light. But on the wooden frame of my bedroom window, one floor above and clearly visible from where we stood, there were 5 deep gouges in the wood, 5 parallel lines carved into the timber by something with claws like knives. And this was the moment I knew everything had changed. This was the moment I understood that my father's rules were not superstition, not paranoia, not the eccentricities of an old man living alone in the jungle. They were the only things standing between us and something that had been hunting in these mountains since before humanity learned to name its fears. My father closed the curtain and turned to face me. His face was gray, aged 10 years in a single night. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. "We need to talk," he said. "There are things you need to know." Things I should have told you years ago. He led me to the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten dinner the night before, back when the world still made sense. The morning light streamed through the windows, golden and warm. but it did nothing to dispel the chill that had settled into my bones. I did not think anything would ever make me feel warm again. My father sat across from me, his hands folded on the table, his eyes fixed on some point in the middle distance. For a long moment he did not speak. When he finally did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What I'm about to tell you," he said, "I have never told anyone. Not your mother, not my brothers, not even the priest who heard my confession when I thought I was dying. I kept it secret because I believed that speaking of it would give it power. I kept it secret because I was ashamed. I kept it secret because I hoped foolishly that if I never acknowledged it, it might eventually forget about me." He laughed then, a hollow sound that held no humor. "It does not forget," he continued. "It never forgets. And now that it has seen you, now that it knows you exist, you need to understand what we are dealing with." I wanted to interrupt, to ask questions, to demand explanations. But something in his tone kept me silent. This was not a conversation. This was a confession. The Maya were here for 3,000 years before the Spanish arrived, my father began. They built empires. They mapped the stars. They created calendars more accurate than anything Europe would produce for another millennium. They were not primitive people. They understood things about this world that we are only beginning to rediscover. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But even they had limits. Even they encountered things they could not explain, could not control, could not defeat. They called these things by many names, but the most accurate translation would be something like the Old Ones, the first walkers, the hollow gods. Beings that existed before humanity, before the animals, before the plants, before even the stones themselves. Beings that came from a darkness so ancient that it predates light itself. I thought of the thing I had heard in the hallway, the chains dragging across the floor, the breathing outside my window. I thought of the cold that had seeped into my room, the cold that had frozen my lamp and my matches and nearly frozen me along with them. The Maya did not worship these beings, my father continued. They feared them. They made sacrifices not out of reverence, but out of desperation, the way a traveler might throw scraps of meat to wolves in hope of distracting them long enough to escape. They built their cities far from the places where these things dwelled. They marked the boundaries with warnings, with curses, with promises of what would happen to any fool who crossed them. He gestured toward the window, toward the jungle that pressed against the edges of our land. "This is one of those places. The Maya knew it. The Spanish learned it, though it cost them dearly. And our family has known it for 5 generations, passed down from father to son like a curse we cannot escape." "Why did we stay?" I asked. "If everyone knew this place was dangerous, why did our family build here? Why did anyone build here?" My father smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because we are fools," he said. "Because we are stubborn. Because we believe that faith and walls and rules could protect us from something that has been hunting since before humanity learned to walk upright." He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "The thing that came for you last night," he said, "has many names. El Chaneque, La Bruja, El Nahual. But the name that comes closest to the truth is the one that no one dares to speak aloud. El que camina de noche, the one who walks at night." I had heard that name before, whispered in the village, muttered by the old women who crossed themselves whenever a shadow fell the wrong way. I had always thought it was superstition, the kind of boogeyman story that every culture creates to explain the unexplainable. "No one knows what it truly is," my father continued. "The Maya believed it was one of the first walkers, a being so old that it had forgotten its own name. The Spanish priests thought it was a demon cast out of hell and condemned to wander the earth. The scientists would probably say it does not exist at all, that it is just a collective hallucination born of isolation and fear." He opened his eyes and looked at me directly for the first time since we sat down. "But I have seen it, and I can tell you that it is none of those things. It is not a ghost. It is not a demon. It is not a hallucination. It is something else entirely. Something that exists in the spaces between things, in the darkness that light cannot reach, in the silence that sound cannot fill. It is absence given form, hunger given purpose. And once it notices you, once it marks you as prey, it never stops hunting. How do you know so much about it? I asked. My father was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Because I saw it. 30 years ago, when I was not much older than you are now. I made a mistake that has haunted me every day since. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the jungle beyond. I was young, he said. Arrogant. I thought the stories were exaggerations, the fears of old women and superstitious peasants. I thought that if I could just see what was making the sounds, just understand what we were dealing with, I could find a way to stop it. He turned to face me. So one night when I heard the chains, I looked out the window just for a second, just long enough to see. What did you see? I whispered. Nothing, he said, and everything. It had no shape, no form, no features that my mind could hold on to. It was darkness, but not the darkness of night. It was the darkness of a place where light has never existed and never will. It was emptiness, but not the emptiness of a vacant room. It was the emptiness of a void so profound that even the concept of existence cannot survive within it. He shuddered a full-bodied tremor that seemed to age him another decade, and it had eyes, he continued, or something that served as eyes, points of deeper darkness within the darkness, fixed on me with an intelligence that was not human, was not animal, was not anything that belongs in this world. When it looked at me, I felt my soul try to leave my body, not out of fear, though I was more afraid than I've ever been, out of instinct. Out of the desperate knowledge that if I stayed in that body 1 second longer, I would be trapped in its gaze forever. He sat back down heavily as if the memory had drained the last of his strength. I screamed, he said. I screamed and I fell back from the window, and I did not stop screaming until my father came and held me down and poured holy water over my face. I was sick for 3 weeks afterwards. The doctors could not explain it. My body was shutting down organ by organ as if it had decided that death was preferable to whatever waited for me if I stayed alive. How did you survive? I asked. My father, he said. Your grandfather. He knew what had happened the moment he saw me. He had seen others who had looked, who had let their curiosity overcome their caution. Most of them did not last a week. They would wake up one morning and simply refuse to open their eyes again. They would stop eating, stop drinking, stop breathing. As if they had decided that existence itself was no longer worth the effort. He reached across the table and took my injured hand in his. But I survived. My father prayed for me day and night for 3 weeks straight. He brought the curandero from the village, and she performed rituals that I do not remember and do not want to remember. They pulled me back from whatever edge I'd been standing on and gave me a second chance. He squeezed my hand gently. But there is no cure. Once you have seen it once, it has seen you. The connection is permanent. It knows where you are. It knows when you are weak. And every night, every single night for the past 30 years, it comes back. It circles the house. It scratches at the walls. It waits for me to make another mistake, to look out the window again, to open the door, to give it any excuse to finish what it started. I looked at my father, really looked at him for what felt like the first time in my life, the gray in his hair. The lines on his face, the exhaustion that seemed to radiate from every pore. This is why you live here, I said. This is why you never remarried, never moved, never left this place. You are trapped. He nodded slowly. If I leave, it follows. If I stay, at least I know where it is. At least I can protect the people I love by keeping them away from this place. Your mother, she did not understand why I insisted on the divorce, why I demanded that she take you to the city and never bring you back. I let her think I was a monster, a cold and heartless man who cared more about his land than his family. It was easier than telling her the truth. He looked down at our joined hands. But I made a mistake. I let you come back. I thought foolishly that after 30 years of hunting me, it would have no interest in anyone else. I thought I could control the situation, keep you safe, show you that there was nothing to fear. He met my eyes, and I saw tears forming in his. I was wrong. It saw you. It heard your voice. It knows you exist now. And last night, when it was at your door, when it was about to break through, I did something I swore I would never do again. My blood ran cold. "Papa," I whispered. "What did you do?" He closed his eyes. "I opened my door," he said. I stepped into the hallway, and I looked at it again. No. The word came out as a moan, a sound of pure anguish that I did not recognize as my own voice. "I had to," he said. "It was going to take you. I could feel it, could sense its hunger focused entirely on you. You were young and untouched and full of light, everything that it craves and cannot have. If I did nothing, if I let it break through that door, you would not have survived. So I gave it something else to focus on, something it already owned." He opened his eyes, and I saw in them a peace that I had not expected. "It is mine now," he said, "completely. The first time I looked, I established a connection. Last night I strengthened it." "It will not hunt you, Valentina, it cannot. The bond between us is too strong, too old, too deep. You are safe. But you," I said, "Papa, what will happen to you?" He smiled, and for a moment he looked like the father I remembered from childhood, the man who had taught me to ride a horse and shown me how to find constellations in the night sky. "The same thing that has been happening for 30 years, he said. "It will come. Every night it will come. And I will not look. I will not open the door. I will pray, and I will wait for dawn, and I will survive. That is all any of us can do against something like this. Survive, one night at a time, until we run out of nights." He stood up and pulled me into an embrace. I could feel his heart beating against my chest, steady and strong, despite everything he had just told me. "You need to go now," he said into my hair. "Take the truck, drive to the village, get on the first bus to Mexico City, and do not stop until you are home." He pulled back and held me at arm's length. "And Valentina, listen to me carefully. There are rules that you must follow for the rest of your life." I nodded, unable to speak. "Never go outside after sunset. Not here, not in the city, not anywhere. When darkness falls, you stay inside behind locked doors and closed windows. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Never open the door to knocking at night, not even if it sounds like someone you know, not even if it sounds like me. The thing can mimic voices. It can sound like your mother, your friend, your lover. It will say anything to get you to open the door. You do not open it, ever." "I understand." And most importantly, my father said, gripping my shoulders with a force that was almost painful, "Never look out the window when you hear sounds in the night, no matter what you hear, no matter how curious you are, no matter how certain you are that there is a rational explanation. You do not look. Because the moment you look, the moment your eyes meet its eyes, you belong to it. And there is no escape from that. Not prayer, not distance, not time, nothing." "I understand," I said for the third time. My father released me and stepped back. The morning light caught his face, illuminating every line and shadow, and I realized with a start that he looked old. Not middle-aged the way I'd always thought of him. Old, ancient, worn down by decades of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. "One more thing," he said. He walked to the cabinet by the door and retrieved a small leather pouch. Inside was a rosary, the beads worn smooth by countless fingers, the crucifix tarnished with age. "This belonged to your great-grandmother," he said. "She was a woman of deep faith, deeper than anyone I have ever known. She survived an encounter with the thing when she was young, and she credited this rosary with saving her life." He pressed it into my hands. "Keep it with you always. When you hear the sounds, when you feel the cold, hold on to it and pray. Pray to whoever you believe in, to whatever force you think might be listening. The words matter less than the faith behind them. It is the belief that creates the barrier, the conviction that there is something stronger than the darkness." I clutched the rosary to my chest, feeling the cool metal of the crucifix against my skin. "Will I ever see you again?" I asked. My father did not answer immediately. He walked me to the door, helped me into my coat, handed me the keys to his truck. "I hope so," he finally said. "But if you do not, If something happens and we never meet again, I want you to know something." He cupped my face in his hands, the same hands that had held me when I was a baby, that had taught me to write my name, that had waved goodbye when my mother drove me away all those years ago. "I love you," he said. "I have loved you since the moment you were born, and I will love you until the moment I die. Everything I have done, every choice I have made has been to keep you safe. And if I had to do it all again, knowing how it would end, I would not change a single thing." He kissed my forehead the same way he had done the night before, and then he stepped back. "Now go, and do not look back." I went. The drive down the mountain was a blur of green and gold, the jungle flashing past the windows like a fever dream. I kept my eyes on the road, my hands tight on the wheel, my mind carefully blank. If I let myself think about what had happened, about what my father had sacrificed, about what might be waiting for him when the sun went down, I knew I would turn the truck around and refuse to leave. I reached the village by noon. The bus to Mexico City left at 2. I bought a ticket, found a seat in the back, and watched through the window as the mountains grew smaller and smaller behind me. I did not cry. I wanted to could feel the tears pressing against the backs of my eyes, but they would not come. It was as if my body had used up all its capacity for emotion and had nothing left to give. I did not cry when I got home, and my mother asked why I had returned early. I told her the ranch was too quiet, too isolated, that I had missed the city. She accepted the explanation without question. I did not cry when I called my father that night, just to hear his voice, just to make sure he had survived another sunset. He sounded tired but calm, and he told me he loved me before hanging up. I did not cry for 3 years. 3 years of phone calls and holidays and carefully avoiding the subject of why I never visited the ranch again. 3 years of sleeping with the lights on and the rosary under my pillow. 3 years of flinching at every unexpected sound, every shadow that moved wrong, every knock on the door after dark. Then the phone call came. It was my uncle, my father's younger brother, the one who lived in Guadalajara and only visited the ranch once a decade. His voice was strange flat in a way that I recognized immediately as shock. "Valentina," he said, "I am sorry. Your father is gone." The words did not register at first. They were just sound syllables without meaning noise in my ear. "What do you mean, gone?" I asked. "He died last night," my uncle said. "The caretaker found him this morning. He was sitting in his chair by the window facing the glass. The doctors say it was his heart that had just stopped, but Valentina, there's something else. Something I need to tell you." "What?" "The walls," my uncle said. His voice cracked on the word. "The walls of his bedroom. They are covered in scratches, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, like something has been clawing at them every night for years." I closed my eyes and saw my father's face the way he had looked that last morning, old and tired and at peace. "There is more," my uncle continued. He left a letter. "It was on his desk, sealed in an envelope with your name on it. I have not opened it, but I think you should come. I think you should see this for yourself." I went. The funeral was small, just family and a few neighbors from the village. My mother did not attend. She sent flowers and a card, but she did not come. I did not blame her. She had built a new life, and that life did not include the man who had pushed her away all those years ago. After the service, after the burial in the small cemetery at the edge of the village, my uncle took me to the ranch. I did not want to go. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay away, to let someone else deal with the house and the memories and whatever was waiting inside. But I had to see it. I had to know. The house looked the same as I remembered. The stone walls, the heavy wooden doors. The windows with their faded curtains, the same curtains my father had insisted on keeping closed every night. My uncle led me to my father's bedroom. He did not come inside. He just stood at the threshold, his face pale, and gestured for me to enter alone. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not decay, but something older. The smell of dust and time and silence, the smell of a room where something terrible has happened and left its mark on the very air. The second thing I noticed was the walls. My uncle had not exaggerated. The scratches covered every surface, floor to ceiling, hundreds upon hundreds of parallel lines carved into the stone and plaster. They were not random. They formed patterns, spirals, and circles and shapes that hurt to look at, shapes that seemed to move and shift when I was not looking directly at them. In the center of the room facing the window was my father's chair. It was an old wooden chair, the same one he had sat in every night for as long as I could remember. The armrests were worn smooth by decades of gripping hands, and the seat was stained dark with sweat. The window in front of the chair was covered by a curtain, but the curtain was torn. Not completely, just a small gap a few inches wide at the corner where the fabric met the frame, wide enough to see through. I looked at that gap for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. My father had spent 30 years never looking out the window. He had built his entire life around that single rule. And yet here was evidence that he had broken it, had pulled back the curtain and looked out into the darkness one final time. The letter was on his desk, just as my uncle had said, a simple white envelope with my name written on the front in my father's careful handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Valentina," it began. "If you are reading this, then it is over. I have looked my last look and breathed my last breath, and whatever remains of me has gone to wherever souls go when they are finally released from their burdens. I want you to understand why I did what I did. For 30 years I kept the rules. I never looked. I never opened the door. I never gave it the satisfaction of knowing that it had won. Every night it came, and every night I turned away, and every morning I told myself that I had survived another day. But survival is not the same as living. I had forgotten that somewhere along the way. When you came to visit, when I saw your face for the first time in years, I remembered what it felt like to have something worth protecting. You were so full of life, so bright and beautiful and untouched by the darkness that had consumed me. I wanted to keep you safe. I wanted to give you the chance to live the life that I had sacrificed. That night when I heard it at your door, when I felt its hunger focused on you, I knew what I had to do. I opened my door. I stepped into the hallway, and I looked. I looked because I love you. I looked because your life is worth more than my fear. I looked because after 30 years of hiding, I finally found something worth dying for. The bond between us is broken now. When I looked, when I offered myself in your place, I severed the thread that connected it to you. You are free, Valentina. It will not hunt you. It cannot. I made sure of that. But there is something you must know. Something I did not tell you that morning because I did not want to frighten you more than you already were. The thing I saw, the darkness behind the darkness, it spoke to me. Not in words, not in any language that humans could understand. But it communicated something, a message that I felt rather than heard. It said that it would wait. It has been waiting for thousands of years. It can wait a few more decades. And when the time is right, when the stars align or the conditions are met or whatever cosmic clock it follows reaches the appointed hour, it will come for you again. Not because of anything you did, not because you looked or opened a door or broke any rule, but because it knows you now. It has tasted the edge of your light, and it wants more. I do not know when this will happen. It could be years from now. It could be decades. It could be on your deathbed when you are old and gray and surrounded by grandchildren who will never know what their grandmother faced in a farmhouse in Chiapas. But it will come. When it does, remember what I taught you. Stay inside. Do not look. Pray. Hold on to the rosary and believe, truly believe, that there is something in this universe stronger than the darkness. And know that I will be with you. Not as a ghost, not as a spirit, but as the love that a father carries for his daughter. The love that does not end with death, the love that exists in the spaces between heartbeats and the silence between words. You are my greatest joy, Valentina. You are the reason I fought for 30 years. You are the reason I finally found the courage to stop fighting. Live your life, find love, have children, fill the world with light and laughter and all the things that the darkness cannot touch. And when it comes for you at the end of all things, do not be afraid. I will be waiting on the other side. With all my love now and forever, your father. I read the letter 3 times before the tears finally came. They poured down my face hot and relentless, and I did not try to stop them. I sat in my father's chair in front of his window with its torn curtain, and I wept for everything he had given me and everything he had lost. When I finally stopped crying, the sun had begun to set. The light coming through the window was orange and red, the color of fire, the color of endings. I stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain closed. Then I walked out of that room, out of that house, and I never went back. The scratches on my arm, the ones I had gotten when I grabbed the frozen doorknob and tore my skin trying to escape, healed slowly. The wounds closed. The scabs formed and fell away, but the scars remained 3 parallel lines running from my wrist to my elbow, white and raised against my brown skin. The doctors could not explain them. They said the marks looked like claw wounds, like something with sharp nails had raked across my flesh, but they could not understand how a doorknob could cause such damage. I never told them the truth. I never told anyone the truth, but I knew. Every time I looked at those scars, I knew, and I remembered. I took the rosary and the letter and a handful of photographs from my father's desk. Everything else I left for my uncle to deal with. The furniture, the clothes, the accumulated possessions of a man who had spent half his life preparing to die. I went back to Mexico City. I finished school. I got a job, then a better job, then a career. I made friends. I dated. I fell in love and out of love and in love again. I built a life. And every night before I went to sleep, I held the rosary and I prayed. Not to God, not to any specific deity. I prayed to my father, to his memory, to the love that he had promised would protect me. I followed his rules. I never went outside after sunset. I never opened the door to knocking at night. I never looked out the window when I heard sounds in the darkness. For 5 years after my father's death, nothing happened. No chains, no knocking, no scratches on my windows or walls. I began to believe that his sacrifice had worked, that the bond had been broken, that I was truly free. I was wrong. It started 3 weeks ago. I had moved to an apartment on the 15th floor of a high-rise in the heart of Mexico City. I chose it specifically because it felt safe, surrounded by millions of people, bathed in the glow of 1,000 streetlights. Nothing could reach me here, I told myself. Nothing could climb 15 stories of concrete and glass. The first sign was the cold. I woke at 3:17 in the morning shivering so hard that my teeth rattled. The apartment thermostat read 72 degrees, but my breath came out in white puffs, and frost had formed on the inside of my bedroom window. I told myself it was a malfunction, a broken heater, a freak weather event. I told myself all the lies that rational people tell themselves when the irrational comes knocking. Then I heard the chains, clank, 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 not from the street below, not from the hallway outside my door, from right outside my window, 15 floors up. I did not look. I grabbed the rosary from my nightstand, and I prayed, the words spilling out of me in a desperate torrent. I prayed until my voice gave out and my lips cracked, and the first light of dawn crept through the curtains. When I finally looked at the window, the frost had melted, but on the glass, written in condensation that should not have existed, was a single word: soon. The next night I found something on my bedroom floor, a chain link, heavy iron corroded with rust. It smelled of rot and age and something else, something that made my stomach turn. I threw it away. It came back. I threw it in the river. It came back. I buried it in a field outside the city. It came back. Every morning, no matter what I did, the chain link appeared in the same spot on my floor. A message, a reminder, a promise. Last night was different. I woke to the sound of scratching. Not from outside my window, from inside my walls, behind my headboard, beneath my floor, above my ceiling. The scratching was everywhere surrounding me, closing in like the walls of a trap. I reached for the rosary and found nothing. The nightstand was empty. The rosary was gone. I searched the room in a panic, tearing through drawers and overturning furniture. I found it on my bathroom floor in front of the mirror, the beads arranged in a perfect circle around a single chain link. And in the mirror standing behind my reflection, I saw it. Not clearly. It does not allow itself to be seen clearly. But I saw the shape of absence, the outline of void, the suggestion of something so old and so hungry that my mind could not process it as anything other than darkness. And it had eyes. I did not scream. I could not scream. I simply stood there frozen, staring at those points of deeper darkness within the darkness, and I understood. My father's sacrifice had not broken the bond. It had only delayed the inevitable. The thing had been patient. It had waited for my father to die, waited for the connection to weaken, waited for the perfect moment to resume the hunt. And now that moment had come. I do not know how long I stood there. Seconds, minutes, hours. Time ceased to have meaning in the presence of something that had existed since before time began. Then it moved, not toward me, through me. I felt it pass through my body like a wave of ice, felt it settle into my bones, felt it curl around my heart like a parasite finding its host. And I heard its voice, not in my ears, in my soul. "You are mine now," it said, "as your father was mine, as his father was mine. As all your bloodline has been mine since the first fool built his house on my land." I wanted to fight. I wanted to pray. I wanted to do something, anything to resist. But I could not move. I could not speak. I could only stand there as it showed me what it had shown my father 30 years ago. The truth. I saw the ranch as it had been before humans came. I saw the jungle ancient and untouched, and the darkness that lived beneath it. I saw the Maya who had stumbled upon this place and run screaming into the night. I saw the Spanish who had built their haciendas and died in their beds. I saw my ancestors, generation after generation, binding themselves to this thing through their fear and their faith and their desperate need to survive, and I saw myself, not as I am now, but as I will be, old, gray, alone. Sitting in a chair by a window, staring at a curtain I have kept closed for decades, listening to the sound of chains, and knowing that tonight, finally, I will not be strong enough to resist. Tonight, I will look. The vision ended. The thing withdrew. I found myself on my bathroom floor, gasping for breath, the rosary clutched in my hand so tightly that the beads had left marks on my palms. But something was different. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, and I saw what the thing had left behind. The scars on my arm, the ones from the doorknob that night 8 years ago, had changed. They were no longer 3 parallel lines. They had grown, spread, multiplied. Now there were 5 lines on my forearm, 5 on my shoulder, 5 on my chest, directly over my heart. And as I watched, a 6th line appeared on my wrist, slowly, painfully, as if an invisible claw was dragging across my skin. I understand now what my father never told me. The thing does not just hunt, it marks, it claims, it writes its ownership on the bodies of its prey, one scratch at a time, until there is nothing left but the scars and the hunger and the endless patient waiting. I do not know how long I have. The scratches appear every night now, one by one, mapping their way across my body like a countdown to something I cannot prevent. But I am still here. I am still fighting. Every morning that I wake up, every day that I spend in the light, every moment that I refuse to look out my window or open my door, I am winning, not the war. You cannot win a war against something that has been fighting since before war was invented. But the battle, today's battle, tonight's battle, that is all any of us can do. I found something this morning that I did not expect. Mixed in with the chain links that appear on my floor, there was a photograph. Old, faded, creased from years of handling. It was a picture of my father as a young man standing in front of the ranch house, smiling at the camera with the easy confidence of someone who has never known real fear. On the back, in handwriting I did not recognize, were 3 words: "We are waiting." I do not know who he is. I do not know how the photograph got here. I do not know if it is a threat or a promise or something else entirely. But I know this: I am not alone in this fight. My father fought for 30 years. His father fought before him, and somewhere in the spaces between worlds they are still fighting, still waiting, still believing that someday, somehow, the darkness will end. I hold on to that belief now. I hold on to the rosary and the letter and the memory of my father's face in the morning light. I hold on to the love that he promised would protect me, the love that does not end with death, the love that exists in the spaces between heartbeats and the silence between words. Tonight, when the sun goes down and the chains begin, I will close my eyes and I will pray. Not because I think prayer will save me, not because I believe in miracles or divine intervention or any of the comfortable lies that people tell themselves to make the darkness bearable. I will pray because my father prayed, because his father prayed, because every member of my family for 5 generations has faced this thing and survived long enough to pass on the warning. The warning is simple: do not look. I will not look. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not until I run out of nights to refuse. The scratches on my body number 47 now, 47 marks, 47 reminders that I am being claimed slowly, patiently, one night at a time. But I am still here. I am still counting. And as long as I am counting, the thing is not won. Have you ever heard sounds outside your window that you could not explain? Have you ever woken at 3 in the morning with frost on your glass and a weight on your chest, and the absolute certainty that something was standing just beyond your sight, waiting for you to make a mistake? If you have, then you know what I am talking about. And you know what I am about to tell you. Tonight before you sleep, check your windows, check your doors, check your mirrors. Look for scratches that were not there yesterday. Look for frost that should not exist. Look for chain links on your floor or photographs in your drawers or any sign that something old and patient has finally decided to collect what it is owed. And if you find something, if you hear the chains or see the darkness or feel the cold settle into your bones, remember the rules. Stay inside. Do not open the door. Do not look out the window. Pray. And wait for dawn, because dawn always comes. No matter how long the night, no matter how loud the chains, no matter how many scratches appear on your skin, the sun always rises. Hold on to that. It is the only truth that matters. It is the only hope we have. My name is Valentina. I'm 25 years old, and I have 47 scratches on my body that were not there 8 years ago. Tomorrow there will be 48, the night after 49. And someday, when the count reaches whatever number the thing has chosen, it will come for me one final time. When that happens, I hope I am strong enough to keep my eyes closed. I hope I'm brave enough to face the darkness without flinching. I hope I am loved enough to find my father on the other side. But until that day comes, I will fight. I will pray. I will hold on to the light and refuse to let go. Not today. Not today. Not today.